I often ask myself if I really know what I'm doing. For projects with more unknowns than knowns, it's hard to tell. For just a second, I wonder what this would have been like if it all went to plan. That old idea, having a plan just come together, well, it doesn't always happen. In just a couple minutes, I'll know if this'll work, or if I really have a problem on my hands. And I worry because this isn't the first time something went wrong. Suddenly, I wonder how much of this is really under my control anyways, or as much as I hate to admit it, am I just along for the ride? Nah, that never happened. There's not a stud broken off in the block, and there's definitely not more than one. It's just a bad dream. It didn't happen. Please, it didn't happen. But it did, didn't it? And no amount of trying to convince myself otherwise can change that fact. If he can't fix it, I don't really know what's gonna happen. My friend Colton, he's a real mechanic. And even more helpful than that, he's dealt with a lot of studs broken off into blocks before. It's part of his job, and I guess if I have to get these out, he is the exact kind of person I want to teach me how to do it, or at least the steps to try. I mean, there's always a chance things could just get worse. I'm trying not to think like that though. So, what he's doing is gonna work. Plus, his E30's drivable again, and I've been dying to check it out. He's the reason I actually have an E30. For as long as I've known him, he's talked about just how fun they are. And now that I've got one, I can see just how right he was. Though his is a little bit different than mine. Someday though, maybe that statement won't be quite as true as it is now. Either way, he was here, and he was ready to help. According to him, it looks like we've got 3 options. And unlike most checklists, the further down we go in this case, the worse it gets. But like I was telling myself before, we just don't have to worry about that. Option 1 is all we'll really need. Option 1 is pretty simple, and according to Colton, it has a pretty good chance of being successful. Plus, for the state we're in, it really is the only thing that makes sense as a first step. The water pump used to have bolts in it. Currently, it has studs because the top sheared off completely. We can't turn it anymore because there's no way to grab onto it. That's where the welder comes in. Since the stud is made out of metal, if we weld a nut to it, we gain the ability to turn it again. We also heat it up in the process, which can loosen it as well. So it sounds like it has a good chance to work. And that's exactly where I found myself. A person who'd like to learn to weld someday, having only seen it a handful of times. Ready to watch, ask questions, and learn. And what I had been doing the entire week before was spraying it with some deep creep anti-seize. And from what I've heard, that'll help just as much as anything else. I was still on the fence as to if this would work. I feel like I don't often run into that kind of luck. But I was hoping to be surprised. And to be honest, I was. Almost immediately, the new bolt started spinning. And that penetrating oil must have done something, because it didn't look like it was getting as stuck as it was before. I mean, this might actually work. I was skeptical, but I was proven wrong. The stud came right out, and I honestly couldn't believe it for a bit. This is gonna work. Actually, if the other studs are anything like this one, it's not only gonna work, but it's gonna be smooth sailing. Why would I say that? Actually, why would I say that? That's the one thing you shouldn't do. Don't jinx yourself. I've done it many times before, but I never learn. I just get excited too easy, and that often leads me to nothing but disappointment. Maybe it was just a bad weld though. Yeah, maybe it just didn't get good enough contact. Attempt number 2 resulted in the same issue. With every nut welded, the stud would inevitably get shorter, even to the point where to actually get a nut on there, he had to build it back up with welding itself. And even though I'm just watching and learning, I've got this sneaking suspicion that it's my fault. And I'm not superstitious or anything like that, but maybe I jinxed us somehow. And the worst part is it wasn't just this stud that welding wasn't working on. I was delivered some truly terrible news. Option 1 wasn't gonna cut it. Things were just about to get riskier. If option 1 wasn't considered invasive, option 2 absolutely is. It's also got a lot larger of a margin for error. Since gripping the screw from the outside doesn't work, we need to somehow grip it from the inside. I was told that option 2 involves drilling out the center of the bolt, not actually drilling the engine itself, just the inside of the bolt. Then you shove a reverse threaded extractor in there, and that's now gripping the shell of the threads from the inside. And since there's no core, ideally there's less pressure on those threads to begin with, so it has a much higher chance to just spin out. And I've never seen these work. The only time I tried them, it just didn't. But once again, I'm hoping to be surprised. The only issue is he didn't bring them with him. We gotta run out to his shop and grab them. Might sound like a bummer to some, but all I'm hearing is an opportunity to check out a boosted E30. Maybe I'll find some inspiration in it. At least for me, riding passenger always gives me time to think. Not just about the car I'm in, but usually whatever I'm working on. And today, I'm thinking about the S6 and the nature of projects as a whole. I'd like to think I'm in control of that car, like I'm choosing where the project's going, guiding it to be running again. But deep down, I wonder if that's true. Am I choosing the direction that car goes, or am I just along for the ride? Who's to say the project isn't taking me on a journey, not the other way around? As we made it back, I was nervous for what was about to happen, but just like before, this was something he'd done before, many times actually, so it was an opportunity to watch and learn once again. And from what I could tell, it was a simple process, though one you have to be careful with. He used a center punch and then a 90-degree drill bit. The real skill came with the technique. If you drill too far, you're drilling into the engine. And if you drill at too much of an angle, you risk breaking the extractor off in there. And the one thing we need to avoid at all costs is breaking off some sort of a new thing in there. That would be a pretty much game over situation, at least according to the man who's done it before. Thankfully, unlike the turbo bolts on my TT, these all drilled out incredibly fast. So as skeptical as I am, once again, maybe I'll be surprised. While we were at the shop, he also brought back a thread chaser. Since this car's getting all new hardware, as I'm not putting the old bolts in, I want to make sure that the same issue that happened before doesn't happen again. So this is going into all of the holes in order to make sure that none of those threads are messed up in any way. But once that was done, it's time to try the extractor. It looks kind of like a drill bit, but it's reverse threaded and intentionally made to grip onto whatever hole you put it into. The issue is it's carbide. So if it at all feels like it's going to snap, he's gonna stop. Drilling through carbide would not just add a couple extra minutes, it could add days to the project. He did his best, but I could slowly start to tell from the way he was talking about it that he didn't really want to push it too far for risk of breaking these. The situation would get a whole lot worse before it got better if this broke off in any way. But pretty quickly, he called it quits with the 2 remaining. And we found another one to try this entire process on again. Looks like when I removed the water pump, I took out an extra bolt for the water jacket. And it turns out I created 4 studs, not 3. They share the same bolts, so when I was counting the water pump bolts, I just missed this one. In other words, we went from 3 issues down to 2, now back to 3. Just part of the process, I guess. I did have hope that this one wouldn't be like the others, that it would be different. But sadly, as time went on, I realized that wasn't the case. This one was stuck as well, and that meant that option 2 wasn't going to work either. What I was left with was option 3, the nuclear option. One I was trying to avoid given how risky it can be, but one that I was unfortunately about to encounter. The threads of the old bolt are part of the block now, and at this point, the only way they're coming out is in pieces. So option 3 involves taking a drill bit larger than the threads and making a new hole in the block. Then you can use a helicoil kit to re-thread that new hole with the same thread pitch as the original hardware. And if this is done correctly, the old bolts will work in the same place with the new threads. But if you mess up, it is the block you're drilling into. And the worst part is that since it's such a specific use case, I've got to order the parts that can actually do it. In other words, yet another delay and yet more time on my hands. I'm the kind of person who always struggles to have extra time on his hands, especially when it was time that I already had a plan for, just one that I can't do anymore. Idle hands are dangerous, so I've got to find something to do, some way forward. I guess the good news is it's not like this car has a shortage of things that need done, but the issue is a lot of these things would be better done after timing's all figured out. I wouldn't want to make things harder by trying to be useful, but that doesn't mean there isn't something I can do. Brakes, tie rod, manifold, valve covers, gaskets everywhere. This car really does need a lot before it's drivable. But what makes sense now? Brakes, I'm waiting for parts. I could do the manifold, but that's a rabbit hole with how many vacuum lines are connected to it. I'd have to learn the whole engine, and I gotta do the vacuum lines before the manifold, so those are probably best done at the same time. Valve covers though, well, actually I can't think of a reason why that wouldn't work. Alrighty then. It's weird trying to pretty up an engine that I haven't actually heard run, but it's also weird to spend this much time working on a car I haven't even driven. And either way, I don't think I could be happy with myself if I put these on as is. One of them's pitted from coolant being all over it, and the other is covered in oily gunk. I know I can't get them perfect, but I do think I can get them better. Plus, it'll be another chance to learn. I've never actually refinished valve covers before. It's something I've always wanted to try, and I think this is the perfect car to practice on. The first step is completely dismantling them though, and weirdly, there's a lot of hardware on these, way more than any of the other valve covers I've dealt with. And what makes the progress even slower is the fact that all of the gaskets are ancient. This is supposed to be rubber, but after years of heat cycling, it is effectively a plastic now. They're brittle, about half the size they should be, and I have no doubt that that's part of the reason these look so terrible. Comparison is the thief of joy, but this is another one of those situations where I can't help but compare myself to others. I wish I had a sandblasting cabinet, and I wish I had the setup to powder coat these and really do this job right, to make these truly perfect again, but that's not where I'm at right now. Right now, I don't have a way to do that without having someone else do it for me, and while it is upsetting to know that it could be better in the future, but it can't right now, I really shouldn't let that get me down. I need to stop focusing on what these could be and just focus on making them better than they are. Just might take a little more elbow grease to get to that stage, and I have no doubt that someday I'll be where I want to be, able to actually do this right. With the majority of the gunk off, I used a wire wheel to clean it as best as I could. I didn't do this for the underside because that's never going to get seen. For that, all I did was try and get all the chunks off so nothing was falling into the cams. Still a lot better than it was. The covers, however, I plan to paint. Both of these are terribly miscolored with age, so I figured I would use some engine enamel primer as well as engine enamel paint and give them a fresh coat. These valve covers are pitted and have many imperfections, so it's not going to be perfect. But once again, it's a situation where I'm trying to shift my mindset. They don't need to be perfect. They just need to be better than they were. And it's the first time I'm doing this, so I'll learn something either way. And the next time I do it, well, it's just going to be even better. Plus, doing this at all is a step forward. It's a way to use my delay productively as opposed to just letting the time pass through my fingers. So no matter how these turn out, that's something I can be happy with either way. After a couple coats of both primer and paint, I stepped back and saw what I did. These aren't perfect, but right now, they're the nicest thing going back on the engine, so I should probably take pride in that. Eventually, both the Helicoil kit and Colton returned. Option 3 was his idea, and once again, he was going to teach me. Another skill that I've been wanting to learn. Since this needs to be a lot more precise though, we need a little bit more room to work. So I took the front end further off and unlocked all the room I would ever need. From here, the process looked like a weird combination of all the steps before. He drilled out all the holes as straight as he could, but he marked the drill bit so that he would only ever go as deep as the threaded insert itself. This is going to sit in those holes, and any further, we risk running into whatever's back there. And after that, what he did next was thread the holes that he just drilled. And this was similar to when we chased the threads earlier. However, this time, as opposed to cleaning up old threads, we are creating new ones. And the good thing about these being water pump bolts is that they don't need to be be point perfect. They just need to be good enough and centered enough that a bolt will thread through the hole in the water pump. Those bolts don't need a whole lot of torque for the water pump to seal, so we really did luck out in that regard. Plus, having someone who's done it before, many times, to learn from is an opportunity to say the least. With the new threads cut, it's as simple as using the tool to thread in the insert and then snap off the end with a hammer and another part from the kit. Other fantastic news is I can pretty much confirm that the source of the knock was the water pump. The water pump was so loose it was digging its way into the metal casing, so realistically, this is the source of our problem. The bad water pump is what caused the car to be sold for so cheap and be torn apart in the first place. So all that needs to be done at this point is to put it all back together, starting by applying RTV to both sides of the gasket and threading the water pump bolts in. And in this case, it's brand spanking new hardware. At this point, I went over to look at the book and refresh my memory as to what goes on next for doing the timing job. I also grabbed the next components, and while I was doing that, Colton was tasked with actually tightening the water pump bolts. He made the threads, so he wanted to make sure that they all worked. You have got to be joking. This is literally brand new hardware. OEM hardware, brand new threads, it went in and out all the way before, zero issues. And right after I turned my back for a second, it too decides that it no longer wants to be a bolt. What is it with this car? And even though Colton was tightening it, I don't blame him or anything. It's just ridiculous. I don't know if it was a flaw in the bolt or what. It's just abysmally frustrating. And at this point, I was still learning. I didn't know these options or these steps before he showed them to me. So there's gotta be something after option 3, right? After chatting with Colton, it sounds like there are actually 2 options left. Well, 1 option, but 2 ways to go about it. To do this correctly, at this point, the engine needs to come out of the car and be sent in for true machine work. And at that point, I question how much money I should put into an engine that has as many miles as this does. We'd be getting close price-wise to just buying a different engine for the car, one with way fewer miles and with a lot more potential to make power. Realistically, this car has RTV on both sides of its gasket, so Colton's other idea was to tap the stud that's stuck in there and then just run a smaller bolt inside of the existing stud, which provides a little pressure on the water pump in the one place where it doesn't have hardware. Definitely not the right way to do this, but it would get this motor running. I am not sure what to do. The only thing I am sure of is that the car is absolutely the one calling the shots here. I really am just along for the ride, aren't I? Maybe that's not a bad thing though. I mean, at the end of the day, I'll learn a lot more from the journey anyways, wherever it is I end up going. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. That's the best way you can help support me and my content. Either way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.